All right, how is it going, everyone? Hope you're having a fantastic morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for tuning in to Forward Thinking Founders. I'm super happy to bring you this awesome episode with Paul Koullick, who's the CEO and co-founder of Keeper Tax. Keeper Tax is a way for independent contractors and freelancers to help them save as much money as possible on their taxes without them having to do that much work. That's what Keeper is for. Today, we talk all about the future of work, the product Keeper Tax, and everything in between of what they're building and why they're building it and how big it could get. I'm stoked to bring you this episode, and with that, let's get into it. Run it. Paul, thank you so much for coming on. How's it going?
Hey, Matt, it's going well. Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, I'm stoked to have you on. I know the first time we connected a few months ago, it feels like a whole nother world, and now it seems like Keeper Tax has progressed so much. So, can you explain for the listeners who don't know what Keeper Tax is? What are you working on?
Yeah, so Keeper Tax exists because we think that gig workers chronically overpay on taxes. So gig workers think 1099 contractors, whether that's, freelance content writers or Uber drivers or whatever it might be, freelancers. These folks, they can write off a lot of things on their taxes, but the rules are very complex. And because most of that information is being sort of, is traditionally held in the brain of an accountant, which is expensive, most people just miss out on a bunch of tax write-offs. And we think that's a shame. And we think that, the future is going to be more and more of this gig economy. And so we're building a platform that makes it, easy to find tax write-offs without having to be like this accounting junkie. The way it works is a customer links their credit card or bank account to Keeper. And then we just monitor their purchases in real time. And we identify when something they buy is tax deductible. And then basically the entire service works over SMS. So when we find something that might be a tax write-off, we send you a text. It might either be like a heads up, like, hey, we've added this, gas expense because we know you drive your car for work. Or it might be a yes or no question, such as, hey, we saw a Dropbox charge, or do you store, files for work in your Dropbox? And then you answer that, and we basically do everything in the background to make sure that you're going to get that money back at tax time. Yeah, so that's how it works.
So you're pretty much like a freelancer's best friend, ultimately, which is like when I first heard about your product, I just knew the massive opportunity for it. I'm curious, you just mentioned that with the rise of the gig economy and whatnot, the rise of freelancers, it's one of the kind of the need is apparent for Keeper Tax. And I'm kind of curious, at what point did you notice the rise in the gig economy, or did you know something was going on and you needed to build something for it?
Yeah. Good question. I've actually always thought that W-2 jobs are a little bit funny. This idea that, everybody like is owned by some company, and that company gets you, between nine and five. And then like provides, for you and your family with benefits. Like, I think that's sort of an old school idea. It makes me think of Mad Men or something. So I've always thought that was sort of a weird thing. And it's true that historically in the United States, we used to have a very different ratio of W-2 versus contracting work. And so, I think there's precedent for switching back to an economy that's much more liquid, where, you are not tied to a single employer. You can move around where needed, and you sort of provide your own benefits, and you deal with your own, taxes in our case, rather than relying on an employer. So I think there's that. I will say that I also previously had some work experience in the space. So I did also work at a business that targeted, or that provided services for this customer base. Back when I was at Stride Health.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. I find that it takes unique insight to even notice there's a trend or a problem. But once you know about it, it's just so apparent, and you just assume everyone knows about the growth in the gig economy and the growth in 1099s and whatnot.
Right.
And I'm always surprised, when most people don't, but it's because, you have to kind of need to like be in it to understand.
Right.
So I'm kind of curious, when you talk to potential customers, like a freelancer, for example, what is the reaction? What's the average reaction that you get when they first use Keeper Tax or they hear about Keeper Tax? Because as you said, a lot of these people don't even understand that they could be like saving all of this money.
Yeah.
So what are some of the reactions that you get, or some of the feelings that are brought up once people start using your platform and saving some money?
Yeah, good question. I think the thing about taxes, the funny thing about taxes is that they're one place in our lives where it's both incredibly boring and also potentially very lucrative. and so what happens is people go in sort of expecting it to be this like productivity thing where like, okay, I'm gonna, like it's gonna keep track of all these expenses for me, and over time they realize that they wouldn't have realized that these things are tax write-offs on their own, because the rules are tricky and we sort of break it down for them. One good example is we do have a cohort of these independent actors who found us down in LA, and for them, like if they go out to like a play, or if they if they're going out to, even sometimes to a concert, like that can be written off as industry education. And so there's usually some point in our sort of customer journey where people are like, oh damn, I would have missed that. And then immediately after we tell them that, hey, actually that is a write-off, we'll tell them, great, you'll get, $34 back at tax time. So it's just kind of this feeling of like, okay, I thought taxes were boring, but hey, this is free money, which can be really exciting for people.
That's actually an interesting concept. You're a type of company that you just said free money, and it ultimately it kind of is, in that you are building software to unlock the knowledge, for these freelancers, these contractors, your customers, to get the money they deserve and save off of their taxes that is usually reserved for an accountant. I'm kind of intrigued in this concept of so one of the last guests we had on the podcast, Kashish Gupta, was talking about the business of trust, and how with business, it obviously has to do with trust. And the faster you build trust, the faster you can do business, and it's just all about trust. And you're kind of building trust with a new set of people that is almost taking trust away from people taking advantage of freelancers, which are potentially like big accountants. Like, how do you think about the trust that you're building and how that will impact your business in the future? And how like this money you're unlocking out of thin air, like how will that like help your company in the next 10 years?
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right that the way we always position it is, look, people have been taking advantage of these things for years, but most of those people have been incredibly wealthy and have been able to afford to have people who like do this for them. And so the way that we build trust is we show our own expertise, and we basically before we even started Keeper, we wrote a lot of content that we sort of worked with our internal accounting team and tax professionals that we hire to put forth our own business's perspectives on where the line is for each of these different types of tax write-offs. So, for example, this industry education example I just gave you, if you search, what counts as industry education online, traditionally the types of articles you get are going to be really sort of wishy-washy. They're all going to end with, you should really consult with your accountants, as the last paragraph. And so what we've done before we even started the business was we put down our perspective in writing, put it on the internet, and put it, had a really strong stance. Because that's one of the things we believe in as a business, is that this information should be public, and it should be accessible, and it should be in the favor of the people, who need it the most, who need the money and who deserve these tax write-offs for expenses that they're incurring because of their work. So when you ask me about 10 years in the future, I hope that we're going to be part of the dialogue a lot more when it comes to the way taxes work in the United States and elsewhere, and how so many parts of today's tax law are maybe not necessarily designed around exploiting sort of lower income, contractor types, but they certainly don't make it easy for the regular person to take advantage of them. And so, I hope that one of the impacts we'll have on the industry as a whole is that we'll start to, be an industry leader in the sense that we'll be the ones that write down exactly what the standard definition of, and logic of what is a tax write-off and what isn't. We write that down, we publish it, it's accessible, and people sort of can rally behind that rather than having all this information be trapped in accountants' heads.
I love it. It's kind of like building a piece of the OS, the operating system of the future of work. Like, in the future of work, there's a lot of things that need to happen. And
Right.
There's a lot of companies that need to collaborate, or not necessarily collaborate, but there's a lot of pieces and gaps that need to be filled by companies, and you're filling in a big one. I'm kind of intrigued. You obviously spend a lot of time with these freelancers and contractors and 1099s. Where do you see like I mentioned, the OS, of the future of work, of the OS of the gig economy? What are some other areas that may not be directly correlated to keeper tax, but are kind of needed to bring the gig economy and bring freelancing full time into fruition? What are other gaps that need to be filled, if you found any?
Oh yeah, a lot of gaps. I mean, I think we all have a lot of work to do to make this happen. And the reality with, there's a lot of startups like ours which are focusing on different parts of the ecosystem, whether it's health insurance or retirement or like finding the job in the first place, invoicing, whatever it might be. We have a lot of catch up to do, because what's happening is that the gig economy is exploding, and companies like Uber aren't really waiting for us to catch up. They're growing very quickly, and they're making everyone contractors. And if those people don't realize sort of all the things that come with that, they end up getting screwed. In our case, that means they're overpaying on taxes. But they might also be like overpaying on health insurance. They might have a really hard time opening a retirement account. It's really hard to get a loan. So all these things are I would say underdeveloped in the gig economy space. And I think it's up to us as founders to fix it.
All right. So another question for you, going outside of the scope of keeper tax, what other industries interest you right now, or interest you might think they'll interest you in the future?
Yeah. Well, the way that our product is set up, we're very reliant on bank transaction data. So we've sort of grabbed that by the horns, and everything in our product lives and dies by whether or not we can accurately categorize, clean up, and identify tax write-offs in people's transactions. And for folks in the audience who have dealt with bank data before, it is in the U.S. it is incredibly messy and complicated, and oftentimes inaccurate. Every bank will sort of append or postpend different strings to the transactions. Pending transactions come in differently than finalized transactions. I can go on for days here, but just that whole industry is so immature. And of course, we have the major player there, which is Plaid, who's sort of, doing an okay job. But I do think that people's transactional data, my transactional data, is very powerful information that should be much more accessible than it is today. And sort of the amount of backbreaking work we've had to do to make that data usable in our product is, was actually pretty surprising for us. We assumed things would be a little bit cleaner and better categorized than it was. So we've had to sort of do so much of our own categorization and cleaning, and both on the algorithmic side and hiring people on Amazon Turk, that I sort of wonder, all these other products that are offering some version of transaction insights about bank transactions, I wonder what they're doing, because I doubt that their business is as reliant on cleanliness as ours is. So I think there's basically a big gap there when it comes to when it comes to build that foundational infrastructure of fintech.
Yeah, I don't know much about the major players outside of the few in the fintech realm, but I
Yeah.
do know that I recently set up a bank account on Mercury, which is a new startup bank that's kind of trying to like compete with Silicon Valley Bank, and setting up that, I think they're like powered with Plaid. And let me tell you, like the process of signing up for Mercury versus signing up for SVB is like light years ahead. It's just much better. So although if you're building products, that I have no idea, and there's probably so many issues that still need to be fixed, and a lot of like loopholes that you have to find. But I know as a consumer, oh my gosh, I freaking love like just how quickly I can like link up banks to different products. I just know nothing about what happens after that. I don't know about the hard stuff.
True. Yeah. No, I think specifically it's the transactions part of it. I think those are really tricky. And I do think there's other parts of the industry, like the fact that you had to sign in with your actual credentials is a little bit funky, right? Like those those banks don't provide APIs, and so so literally what's happening in the background is that Plaid is creating a little scraper bot that goes and pretends to be you and logs in, and then has to be constantly updated whenever SVB or whatever bank you're linking changes their sort of UI, which is nuts, which is crazy, and such a fragile ecosystem that all these fintech companies are being built on. But yeah, it is nice as a user.
See, I don't know it's kind of like when I was working on Publoft, like it's nice as a freelancer to sign up, get work, get paid. But little do they know the stuff that happens, inside to make all that happen. So,
right.
Well, man, I have a couple more questions for you, and then we'll wrap it up. I appreciate you popping on and telling us about Keeper Tax and kind of like enlightening me just about that industry, and I've definitely learned a lot already, which is awesome. The couple more questions that I have are, one, what would you say is like in 30 years, or let's say 30 years, let's say Keeper Tax works, meaning you scale and you win. What does that look like? Like what does the world look like with a Keeper Tax at scale? And what does that mean for everyone else, in the gig economy?
Yeah. I mean, we see ourselves as the next Intuit, right? Like we think that Intuit was built on a world that was primarily W-2. We think the future is primarily gig, or rather contract independent. And so this idea that so many things are built into the current sort of tax software and the way that tax platforms work, like the idea that everyone gets a refund and that everyone is, like it only has to do it at the end of the year. Like I think those things are going to be more or less obsolete, and you're going to have a relationship with your taxes that is much sort of simpler and less dreadful, where you're not sort of trying to do this all at the end of the year. So I think that's a part of it. I think another part of it is simply that more people are going to be empowered, right? In the same way that TurboTax took away the sort of the variance that accountants have, and then you might just end up with bad accountants, and so you just don't get the tax write-offs you deserve. We're doing that, but at a much more personal and customizable scale. Like we're able to do that by looking at your actual transactions one by one, rather than sort of having to ask you, TurboTax style questions. And so I think it's just the next evolution of democratizing this tax knowledge, so that hopefully fewer people are getting screwed at the end of the year.
I love it. Well, I have one last question for you, Paul. You're building the software to help so many independent contractors, freelancers save money on taxes, not get screwed at the end of the year. And with the rise of the gig economy, you really are building the future with Keeper Tax. So I'm interested in hearing. There's people that are listening to this that they may have not started a company, they may have not done much yet in the realm of entrepreneurship, but they have this urge and this desire to change the world or change someone's world. So what advice would you give to the listeners, who want to do something big in the world, want to change the world, but may not know exactly how?
Yeah, man, I feel like my advice here would change every month, but the flavor of this month is I think a lot of, like, Rome wasn't built in a day, is the cliche way of saying it. But the thing we've started to realize with Keeper is that, we started out with this mission to put money back in these gig workers' pockets. And I think there were many times along the journey, even so far, that we felt like there's been these insurmountable barriers, like, oh man, but like, you don't get the money until the end of the year. So how can we possibly, get people excited about that? Like, whatever it might be, there were constantly sort of moments like that. And we just sort of kept building towards the dream that we had starting from the beginning. And it's so much of that has materialized now that we've sort of put that into the world. I can't say that it applies to everyone. And sometimes you start out with a dumb idea, and me include, like, I've done that many times before as well. But the one thing we've learned from Keeper is that, it takes time to build a really great product, and it's sort of those rewards are reaped over time. And so if you truly believe something in your heart of hearts, if it's not something that you're like, is like a get rich quick scheme or some like little trick that you like to talk about over brunch, like, if you really believe in it and you really think there's a problem, then, keep at it. Like, that is a problem, and it does need to be solved. And maybe whatever solution you've got is wrong, but the problem is still great.
There we go. I like that a lot. I appreciate that. And I know a lot of the listeners appreciate it as well. And I appreciate you coming onto the show and spending your time, on the Forward Thinking Founders podcast. So thank you for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And for those listening in the audience, or in your cars, or in your bedroom, thank you for spending, 35 minutes with the crew at Forward Thinking Founders. I hope you all have a great rest of your mornings, afternoon, and evenings. Have a good one. Bye. Bye. Bye.